Hello, and welcome to my podcast on the unit Primary Health and Physical Education. Personal Development, Health and Physical Education, also known as PDHPE, helps students to be able to develop knowledge, skills, and the understanding of taking positive actions to protect their own and others' physical health, safety, and well-being. Having physical education be a part of the curriculum is a necessity, as it is important that students gain the ability of all the fundamental movement skills and also have the chance to participate in physical activities confidently, competently, and creatively. By participating in PE lessons, it gives the students the chance to interact with others. It also teaches them how to respect others whilst learning. Through PE, students get the opportunities to research health and movement concepts to maintain the health, safety, and well-being concept in physical activities. Students are also given the opportunity to research about health-related sources, services, and organisations to critique the attitudes, behaviours, and stereotypes about physical education. The objectives for PE are knowledge and understanding, skills and values and attitudes. By meeting these objectives throughout PDHPE, students will learn to demonstrate their understanding about all aspects of health, safety, and well-being. The Game Sense approach engages students in modified games and gives them the opportunity to develop skills and understanding of the game. So this approach is commonly based on a warm-up, game, question and discussion, skill practice, further questions, and lastly, an extension of the game. An article by Charlesworth in 1994 described the Game Sense approach as an idea of designer games to combine technical and tactical skill learning to develop game sense in students. So rather than giving the students explicit instructions on how to play a game, Charlesworth actually advocated the use of questioning to create challenges for the students. So this approach led to the teacher becoming more of a designer and modifying the games to match the students' skill and developmental levels. So the Game Sense approach can be very useful in primary school education as it gives you as the teacher the opportunity to differentiate, and it also promotes thinking and participation in games. So this works well within the syllabus as there are content descriptors that include the students to be participating in games such as ACPM P009, which is participate in games with and without equipment, which could come under the outcome PDE-5, which is explores possible solutions to movement challenges through participation in a range of activities. So using the Game Sense approach to cover this outcome can help the students explore the possible solutions to movement challenges through games. So another outcome where the Game Sense approach would work would be the outcome PDE-6, which is explores contextual factors that influence an individual's health, safety, well-being and participation in physical activity, with the content descriptor being participate in games and physical activities that require awareness of personal safety and boundaries. So how I would implement the Game Sense approach through this outcome is I would go back to Charlesworth's idea. So you would have a warm-up, a game, some question and discussion time, some skill practice, further questions, and then lastly an extension of the game. Through the question and discussion time, you would talk about personal safety and boundaries, and then when lastly playing the extension of the game, you would emphasise the rules of personal safety and boundaries. So they explained to us when teaching AFL, we should have a pedagogical approach of each lesson being around about 50 minutes. So 10 minutes of guided discovery and then the remaining time into 4 quarters. So splitting the lesson into 4 quarters will keep the students engaged and excited to learn, as they are doing something different every 10 minutes. If you have students participate in a PE lesson that is just one activity for 15 minutes, they'll probably find it boring and then disengage from the lesson. So games like AFL challenge students individually and collectively to learn in relation to the cognitive, social, emotional and physical domains. Whilst teaching the PE lesson to students, it's really important to follow a certain sequence. So firstly, you need to demonstrate. So modelling to students an activity is always helpful, especially for the younger ones, as they tend to struggle to understand as well as the older children. So after demonstrating, you are then going to allow the students to successfully complete the task. So by doing this, it will give the students confidence in participating further in the lesson. Then, whilst the students are participating, it's important to provide that feedback. So let students know how they're going. If they have no guidance throughout a lesson, there'll be no development in the skill at hand. So whilst teaching PE, it's really important to differentiate, as you will most likely have students of different ability in your class. So some ways of differentiation in PE is you could adapt your coaching method to suit the students of lower or higher ability. If you're playing a game, you could probably change up the way the students have to score to either make it easier or harder. You could make the area smaller or bigger. You could change up the rules to change how the game is played, and you could probably include more or less equipment. So in our other practical lesson we had that was held by AFL New South Wales, they let us run our own lessons in groups of 4 or 5. So whilst running our lessons, we had to consider all of the elements of the PE lesson that I just mentioned beforehand. So whilst working with other students to construct our lesson, it was really challenging as we all had to equally teach the lesson and work together to be able to deliver the content in a pretty successful way. So we also had the opportunity to see how other students in our class would run their lessons as teachers and participate in those lessons. I found this helped me a lot to see how the elements of other pre-service teachers' lessons and what I could and probably wouldn't implement in my lessons when I teach PE in schools. So a study conducted by Morgan and Hansen in 2008 said that teachers believe PE is beneficial as a vehicle for physical activity and positively impacts the learning and behaviour in the classroom. So this is why it is important as pre-service teachers to be learning the best ways we can deliver PE content. So after participating in this lesson, what I took away was that it's really important as superiors to empower teachers to deliver quality content to their students, as this will then encourage the students to stay engaged. To have quality school sport programs, you will also need to have a program that is to provide students with opportunities all year round. You need to develop an inclusive program which promotes the inclusion of all students. It will prioritise participation, teamwork and enjoyment, and have competitive pathways and make sure you include differentiation. In one of our tutorials, we spoke about the 3 levels of planning for a unit of work. So they are a scope and sequence, a program, and then a lesson plan. So a scope and sequence is something that is compulsory by NESA and has to be done for all subjects, not just PDHPE. It is designed to help build a basis for curriculum development, instructional strategy, and assessment practices and provide consistency. So what a scope and sequence is that it summarises what is being taught over the term and then obviously the sequence in which it is being taught. It also highlights the syllabus outcomes that will be met and should not be longer than a single page. So when developing a scope and sequence, it is important to identify your students' needs so that you know what to include in the scope and sequence. So you would consider the environment you are in and the school culture and community in and around the school. When establishing a scope and sequence, there are syllabus requirements that need to be met. So some of them include that all strands must be covered every year, all knowledge, understanding and skill outcomes must be addressed in each stage, all content dot points must also be included across the stage for K to 6. So each skill domain must be included each year and opportunities for physical activity should be provided each week as a minimum. After a scope and sequence is developed, you can then move on to programming. So think of the theme you want for your unit of work, pick your key inquiry questions, and then identify the outcomes and choose the content you will be teaching. When it comes to quality programs, what you want it to look like is it will contain relevant outcomes. The learning experience will have purpose and meaning, and the assessment is purposeful and high quality. You'll also have feedback opportunities, and a reflection and evaluation is also encouraged. So once the program is done, then you will get your lesson plans from that program and plan your lessons accordingly. So the importance of 3 levels of planning is very significant because you need to make sure you are teaching your students the correct curriculum and make sure you are covering all syllabus outcomes and content. Without a scope and sequence and a program, there would be very little organisation in your lessons and you could miss out on teaching some outcomes. In week 2, we learn about the cross-curriculum content that is covered in PE. The cross-curriculum priorities are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, and then sustainability. So firstly, with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, the students could explore this priority by learning and celebrating the Indigenous culture and building their knowledge and understanding of cultural beliefs to lead healthy and active lives. Students would also explore the significance of family structure and consider the influence of social and cultural relationships and connections to personal health choices. It would also be beneficial for students to participate in physical activities that endorse cultural practices that are appropriate to local community guidance, such as physical activities, games, and cultural dance. So students could also explore issues of discrimination, racism, pro-social behaviour, and histories to help them understand on how to promote an equitable Australian society. Lastly, they would understand the significance Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have had on Australian sport and identity and the sustainable health and health practices they have. This is important to have this cross-curriculum priority as it is a vital part of education that students need to learn about today. So Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders were this nation's first people, and to have their culture taught in schools is vital to the younger generation. So moving on to Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, the students would explore this priority by exploring the attitudes and behaviours of Asian culture and teach them empathy and respect to enable them to engage with the diverse cultures and belief systems of the Asian region. So students would also examine the connections across the cultures of the Asian region and see how this influences the community health and well-being. So another way students would explore this priority is they would participate in physical activities and games that are a representation of the Asian culture. And they would also recognise the importance of the cultural practice on living a healthy, active and safe lifestyle. So it's really important for students to learn about Asia and Australia and Asia and have a significant relationship. And if the students learn about the culture and their way of life, it will help the students appreciate and understand the relationship Australia and Asia have. So the last cross-curriculum priority is sustainability. So how students would explore this priority is they would see how actions to improve sustainability are both an individual and shared responsibility. They would consider how supporting the environment that they live in helps in contributing to the health and safety of the individuals in the community. They would reflect on their knowledge and understanding of the skills that are needed to adopt a sustainable way of living. They would examine the environmental factors that have an impact on our health, safety and well-being and physical activity of individuals and groups. They would develop and build their strengths to take positive action on environmental issues and also build a connection with nature to help them appreciate the health and safety and well-being of people in their environments. I find it's really important to teach students to be sustainable as it's the way of the future. By teaching students now on sustainability, it will help them lead sustainable lives in the future and save their environments around them. In conclusion to my podcast, what I have learnt throughout my time studying primary health and physical education is that sometimes PE can be pushed aside in the classroom for other subjects such as maths and English to take priority. But PE shouldn't be pushed aside as its content is just as important, if not more relevant for students' future to be learning rather than maths and English. In saying this, once I have my own classroom to teach, I will make sure there is always time for PE to take place in the classroom because the life skills it teaches students is important for them to lead healthy, happy and safe lives. When it came to the learning activities, it helped me develop an understanding of the pedagogy of health and physical activity, and it helped me to build and refine my research skills. My confidence going into teaching PE after this subject is very high as I feel like I have learnt a lot about primary health and physical education. I've really learnt how important it is to have a program and plan out lessons so content never gets left out, and that PE isn't just all about going outside and playing sport. There are many more theoretical and practical components that go into the unit, and I really look forward to be able to teach PE when I graduate from my degree. Thank you for listening to my podcast.